The hospital still reeked of gunpowder and antiseptic as the final wave of staff and security swept the corridors clean, murmuring in hushed tones about the two lives almost lost beneath the glare of operating room lights. In that charged atmosphere, Hope Logan moved like a shadow, her steps measured, her face calm, a studied mask designed to conceal the storm she was brewing. Though she had watched Steffi kneel beside Liam's bed, tears staining the blue sheets as his monitor's beeps fluttered between life and death, Hope's own heart hammered not with fear, but with calculation. She sensed the fissure that had opened between Finn and Steffi, born of exhaustion and grief, and she knew that now, more than ever, she could exploit his lingering guilt and his need for solace. One evening, after Steffi collapsed into a fitful sleep beside Liam's still recovering form, Finn found Hope waiting in a quiet alcove of the surgical wing, her eyes gentle, her voice a soft whisper of concern that drifted through the sterile air like a promise. She reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, and when he looked at her tired, raw, seeking comfort, she leaned in and pressed a kiss to his lips that tasted of vulnerability and unspoken longing. Finn froze for a heartbeat before his arms closed around her, and in that moment Hope felt the exquisite thrill of triumph. The kiss was not mere compassion, but a strategic gambit, a silken noose to bind his loyalty to her side. As Steffi slept unaware and Liam's condition stabilized under the watch of experts, Finn pulled away from Hope with a trembling apology, but the seed had been planted. The next morning, reporters sniffed out the first whispers of discord. Finn's late-night visit to hospital wing, Hope comforts distraught doctor, questions arise over Spencer-Forrester alliance. Steffi found her husband distant, her friend radiant with quiet victory, an alliance shifting beneath her very eyes. Then came the second blow. An enterprising young journalist from an online tabloid, digging deeper, discovered the firestorm of texts sent to Luna Kendrick in the days leading up to her desperate hospital siege. Provocative messages accusing Steffi of hiding the truth about Luna's child, urging revenge, fanning the embers of her fragile mind until it erupted in violence. The reporter traced the IP addresses back to a burner phone purchased in Hope's name, and when he confronted her with the evidence, screenshots, delivery receipts, phone bills, Hope's flawless facade flickered. The story went live at noon. Hope Logan, puppet master behind Luna's madness? The headline shattered her image as the pure-hearted Logan-heir, stirring a frenzy among fans and donors who had always seen her as the shining light of the Logan dynasty. Panic threatened to erupt in Hope's chest, but she had prepared her counterstrike. Within hours, a curated set of intimate photographs appeared on every entertainment blog, Hope and Finn entwined in a sunlit hotel suite, soft whispers, gentle laughter, the curve of her hand on his cheek. Images that told a deeply personal story of two souls drawn together by compassion, of a woman abandoned by all but one and the doctor who alone offered her refuge. Each photo was captioned with a single line, Hope and Finn, love's innocent victims. Hope watched as the internet's tide turned. Sympathy washed over her like a bomb, drowning out the earlier allegations with an outpouring of concern. How could a heart so pure conspire to ruin someone? Isn't it cruel to accuse a grieving woman of plotting violence? Steffi seethed as she read the headlines, her fury fueled by betrayal and the knowledge that her closest friend had manipulated every angle to serve her own ambition. Finn, torn between guilt and gratitude, found himself embroiled in a media maelstrom, his words twisted in quotes that cast him as Hope's willing accomplice. The boardrooms of Forrester Creations buzzed with whispered debates. Should they sever ties with the Logans before the scandal dragged them down? Across social media, the hashtag #HopeTheVictim trended as Ferguson and Logan allies rallied around her, while hashtag #ExpoSeligan gained traction among those who smelled a corporate coup in the making. Yet beneath the public spectacle, the real drama unfolded in hushed meetings. Matching lawyers pored over defamation suits and severance agreements. Private investigators followed Luna as she recovered in psychiatric care, and in the opulent Logan Manor, Hope's father, Whip Jones III, watched his daughter's empire of goodwill crumble while she stood at the center of the storm, her icy composure cracking only in the dead of night when the glare of cameras and spotlights faded. In those private hours, Hope allowed herself a fleeting moment of doubt, wondering if her ruthless strategy had gone too far, if the lines she crossed in the pursuit of power would ever wash clean. But Dawn always found her renewed, steeling herself as she prepared her next move, a public statement denouncing the claims, thanking her supporters for their unwavering faith, promising justice for her and Finn's stolen peace, and hinting at evidence that would soon clear her name once and for all. As she spoke, her voice steady and magnetic, a new iteration of Hope Logan emerged, no longer the naive idealist, but a woman forged in scandal, wielding her darkness as deftly as her light. The city held its breath, awaiting the next chapter in this saga of love, betrayal, and ruthless ambition, and beneath the veneer of silk and smiles, the true Lady Logan stood ready to seize her destiny, whatever the cost. Finn Spencer woke before dawn, long before the city lights flickered off and the world beyond the Spencer, Forrester compound lay in a fragile hush. Haunted by the image of Luna Kendrick's vacant eyes and Liam's fighting pulse, he sat at the edge of his bed, scrub top wrinkled beneath his trembling hands and hospital ID badge still pinned to his chest like a curse. In the sterile quiet of his mind, he heard the steady beep of the ICU monitor, demanding answers no doctor should ever have to give. How could he justify saving Liam's life when Luna's was left dangling in the shadow of his medical triumph? By midday, the email arrived, an invitation to appear before the California Medical Board's Committee on Professional Conduct to testify about conflicts of interest, the very phrase cutting deeper than any scalpel. The committee wanted to know whether Finn had deliberately prioritized Liam, the man whose bullet-riddled body he had fought to revive so that his wife Steffi's lover, and thus his own son's father, could live on, while Luna, a grieving mother driven mad by grief engineered by Hope Logan's manipulations, had been neglected by the very hands sworn to uphold the Hippocratic Oath. Within hours, Finn found himself thrust into a maelstrom of media frenzy. News vans camped outside his home, microphones thrust at his face as gossip anchors dubbed him the White Coat Monster, demanding apologies for playing favorites with his patients. On every network, pundits parsed his every word, accused him of ethical dereliction, and speculated whether he would be stripped of his license and banished from the operating room forever. Bill Spencer, ever the opportunist, smelled blood in the water and unleashed his corporate media machine. He resurrected every misstep from Finn's surgical record, an appendix incision that had reopened, a momentary lapse in judgment during an emergency tracheotomy, painting the image of a doctor whose saving of Liam had been nothing more than a reckless bid for notoriety. Tabloids splashed headlines like "Spencer Surgeon's Shocking Secret" and "Hippocratic Hypocrisy" across newsstands from Malibu to Santa Monica, each lurid detail amplified by the wail of cell phone cameras and the churn of online trolls. Steffi kept her distance, torn between standing by her husband and protecting her family's reputation at Forrester Creations, where rival board members whispered that shift in power could topple her father's empire. Liam, released from the hospital with a convalescent bruise on his ribs and his wife in stable condition, was trapped in a cyclone of guilt and gratitude. He reached for Finn each night, only to find the surgeon's bed cold and empty, Finn too consumed by nightmares of Luna's blood and Hope's betrayal to offer solace. The public hearing was scheduled just days later in a windowless boardroom lined with austere black leather chairs and the watchful gaze of stern-faced committee members. Finn entered in a crisp suit his mother had chosen for him, feeling the weight of each step like a pendulum swinging toward doom. The clerk of the board read the charges: failure to provide equitable care, conflict of interest, breach of professional ethics, conduct unbecoming a physician. Finn listened as his own meticulously drafted medical notes were dissected, each timestamp scrutinized for favoritism. Did he reroute nursing staff to Liam's bedside? Had he delayed Luna's transfer from the psych ward for an emergency CT scan, knowing her case might compromise his reputation? Under oath, he spoke haltingly, admitting only that the convergence of personal anguish and professional duty had clouded his judgment, but never intentionally. He described how Liam's injuries threatened to rupture his aorta in minutes, how the hospital code demanded immediate intervention, how Luna's adamant refusal to leave the asylum's locked unit without cause had complicated her care. Yet behind his carefully chosen words lay the raw truth. He had looked at his patient, Liam, and seen his own worst fears reflected back: Steffi's tears, her pleading eyes, and he had acted, not as an impartial healer, but as a man whose heart had a fault line he could not conceal. Outside, cameras rolled as Finn emerged from the hearing chamber into a corridor thrumming with reporters. Flashbulbs ignited like gunfire as he brushed past them without a word, the echo of his footsteps swallowed in the roar of public opinion. Social media erupted. #RemoveFinn now trended worldwide. Memes comparing him to a villainous surgeon spread like wildfire. Bill Spencer watched from his rooftop office, a cold smile passing over his face as he texted legal counsel to push for a new civil suit against Finn for malpractice and emotional distress caused to the Spencer family. Steffi's own board members confronted her in the hallway, pressing memos that questioned her loyalty. If Finn was a liability, should she remain bound to him by marriage, or should she seek a separation to protect her children and her company? Meanwhile, Hope Logan, having orchestrated this crisis from the shadows, watched the spectacle unfold on her private television feed, her expression a mask of faux concern. She knew that the final verdict hung not only on Finn's testimony, but on his willingness to sacrifice everything for his oath. To choose the Hippocratic path or to shield his family from ruin by admitting guilt and accepting a lesser penalty. Inside his study that night, Finn stared at the antique scalpel on his desk, Ridge Forrester's gift for his residency graduation, its blade reflecting the lamplight, and an unspoken question. What was a doctor without his license, a husband without his honor? A man whose oath meant less than a media empire's vendetta? He pressed his palm against the glass of the photo frame that held his wedding portrait, Steffi's radiant smile beside his own, and he heard, as though in a dream, the steady hum of the ventilator that had sustained Liam. In that fragile moment, he resolved to do what he must, truth above all, knowing that to save his family, he might have to pay the ultimate price. The next morning, he returned to the boardroom for the final day of hearings, prepared to lay bare every miscalculation, every emotional frailty that had influenced his surgical decisions. He would place his Hippocratic oath above all else, even if it cost him his license and his marriage. As the gavel fell and the panel murmured its preliminary findings, the flashing lenses captured his steely resolve. Finn Spencer, once the city's brightest surgical star, now standing at the edge of professional oblivion, ready to pay in full the debt of loyalty to his sacred vow, and trusting that the bond he shared with Steffi, tempered in the fires of crisis, might yet survive the tempest he had let loose.